Hey, what's up guys? Disney Nuts here. How you guys doing? So today I'm going to actually show you 5 quick fixes to many issues that pop up to us photographers when editing all the time. So without further ado, let's head to the video. Before we jump into the editing part, I just want to say one really important thing, and I wanted to keep it in the back of your mind. That is that nobody has seen the original photo that you are editing. So any edit that you do, don't feel a little weird. Oh, I don't think it looked better. I think I'm cropping too much out. Nobody has seen the original photo. So whatever you do, it's going to be the first time everybody sees it. So have fun with it. So the very first one is actually adjusting your temperature on the photos. Now, many times, if you're like me, you usually have your camera set to automatic white balance. So it will happen most of the times if you're taking photos around Walt Disney World, where some of the lights are warmer and some of them are cooler. Many times around Walt Disney World, the stuff is usually warmer, which means there's more red, orangey type of, yellow type of bulbs and stuff like that. So one really good quick fix is actually adjusting your temperature here in Lightroom. Now here's a shot that I took of Cinderella's fountain that's behind the castle. And while it looks really good, no problems whatsoever, if you want to give it like a more warm, cozy feel, then we can actually slide the temperature to the right, and it gives it, you can see it brings up that more like warm yellowish orange colors. I personally like to go more to the cooler side, but again, this is just a matter of preference. When I adjust the temperature tool, what I like to look for sometimes, if you're trying to look for a more natural feel, is look for something that is like a tree, or sometimes a wall, or something that is white, and you can use as a base, and then everything else will fall into place. Next one is actually making waterfalls pop. Now this is one that's actually pretty easy, and many people didn't know that this little trick exists. Now when you're shooting long exposures like this, where you have the really cool waterfall, sometimes they'll have like lights on them, and what I like to do, which I think really makes it look cool, is if you can get that waterfall as white as possible, because it makes it really pop. And the way to do that is actually pretty easy. Using our brush tool here in Lightroom, we're actually going to desaturate the image. So I'm going to hit the K key on my keyboard. Again, this is a Windows computer, and it's going to bring up the option to use a brush, a gradient. We're going to select the brush. Now I like to put the flow usually around 50%. You can leave the auto mask on or off. It depends what you want to do, but I'll usually use the flow of 50, and the brush size, depends how big the fountain is. And then you'll see it brings all these options up here that you can do for adjusting using the brush. And I'm going to go down here to the saturation option, and I'm going to go to the left, which means a negative value, and I'm going to paint over the waterfall. Now you'll see how it's going to really pop, and it actually takes the color away, and it makes it look really standing out. And you can as well, if you want to, you can even bring the exposure up a little bit, and but you don't want to bring it up too much. Another thing that I like to use sometimes when it comes to water is the clarity, which makes it give it that really cool like glossy mirror type of look to it. Next one is cropping. Now I know this probably sounds pretty basic, but if you're like me, sometimes you see the image and you're like, well, I don't want to crop this, I don't want to crop that. But sometimes you can use it to your advantage. Like for example, here's an image that I shot with an 85mm lens. I was at the end of Main Street, and I think it's a great shot, but the only bad thing is that, as you can see, I cut most of the people's heads off. Main Street looks great, but again, it looks only like half. Donald and Daisy down here, they're cut, so it doesn't look really that good. So I'm actually going to crop in, and I want you to see how much I cropped in to the image, because you can see that even though sometimes the image you think they may not be usable, if you crop, sometimes you can actually keep those images. So, and sometimes those images you can even use more than once if you do different types of cropping. And here, for example, we got Mr. Mickey here with his 50th anniversary suit coming down Main Street, which looks really cool. And even though it looks like I took it with a zoom lens, I was actually pretty far away. So never discard the option of zoom, and never discard the option of cropping an image. Now, like I said before, don't worry, nobody has seen the original image, so when you crop like this, don't feel bad that you're not showing the whole image. Next one is actually the Vibrance and Saturation tools. Now one thing that I always tell myself is try to use the Saturation tool as less as possible, and always use the Vibrance tool. And the reason for that is the Vibrance tool actually protects the skin tones when you start bringing it up on the colors. In the case of saturation, it will bring up all the colors, which will make sometimes the skin tones look a little weird. And we'll use a perfect example here of Mrs. Snow, and we'll use a perfect example here of Mary Poppins here on the parade. And you'll see here I have my options here of Vibrance and Saturation. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the Vibrance to like 70, and you can see how still her tones on the skin look balanced. They look nice. It doesn't look oversaturated. But when it comes to the other colors like the red and the blue back here and the orange, you can see how it really pops, which makes it look really good. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with saturation so you can see the difference of what the saturation does. I'm going to bring that up to 73 and look at her skin tone. It looks like she's been in the sun too long. The white dress somewhat looks, you know, like the colors are on top. It doesn't look that good. It looks like a little overdone. It looks like somebody used a bad app on it. So my tip right here is to actually use the vibrance instead of the saturation when possible, and use it with moderation. Next one is when you have stuff that's somewhat like overexposed and you want to try to always balance the photo, which is a recommendation I always give everybody. Try to make the photo look balanced. Even though you want to point the eye towards a specific part of the photo, you want the rest of it to look not overexposed or underexposed. And in this case, we can have a clear example here of Rapunzel's coming down on the cavalcade, and you'll see where her body is a little bit overexposed, but her face is, you know, relatively pretty much where we want it to be. So again, using the paintbrush tool, we're going to actually bring the exposure down on the body part from the head down to make it look a little bit more normal. Again, we're going to select the brush tool, and right here we're going to see the exposure, and we're going to bring our brush, the same thing, usually around 50% on the flow, the size, whatever size it's comfortable for you. And I'm just going to paint here, and you can see how the dress is starting to come down in tone. It doesn't look that bright. And again, you can you know, when it comes to editing, it's always your style. So while I'm showing some editing tips here, always give it your touch and flair to your type of editing. We can bring this down a little more. Another tool that I like to use here when trying to correct stuff like this, which is a little bit overexposed, is the dehaze, where we actually bring it up. And that what's going to do is going to like take a little bit of that high end of the photo, like I like to call it, which is the case that we have here. So if I bring this to the right, you'll see how it starts to bring all that down here. Now you got to be careful, because you don't want it to look too contrasty, and then it's going to look like it's starting to wash out a little bit. So again, everything in moderation always looks good here. There we go. And now you'll see that the dress looks somewhat a little bit normal in comparison to the exposure to the face of the character. Now another tip when you're using cropping is where you actually use the rule of 4/3, which is what I like to use. That way it gives you like somewhat a base to where you want to adjust your cropping. And I'm looking at this photo here, which is Alice, and the same thing, she's coming down on the Move It Shake It parade. And if I come to my crop tool, you'll see what I've actually cropped from the whole photo. In this case, I was actually had the camera sideways. But when I wanted to crop, because I didn't like the photo, it basically had that bar in the way, and you can't see her feet. And so I wanted to you know, crop pretty much into the photo. But when you're asking yourself, well, how much should I crop? Well, I like to use the rule of 4/3, which is where in the intersecting lines you'll put either the eyes, the face, an arm, something that is like a point of reference, and that's where you want to put the intersecting lines. For example, here you'll see it's right here on her face, and it gives that really cool effect of her a little bit to the right, or you could sometimes do it a little bit to the left. There you go. Now another thing that I run into a lot, and I'm sure you guys run into a lot, let's say you shoot a lot of the stuff handheld, and you see that the images come out pretty good, right? But then it comes to the sky, and you see the sky, it's got all this like this weird stuff to it. Well, what I always do is I paint the sky, just like I've done it here where we do stuff with balancing. I'll actually paint the sky to a darker color, or actually saturate it to make it look better. For example, here you'll see that the sky is blue, but it has some, you know, some artifacts here that doesn't look really good. So I'm going to use my tool again, my brush tool. And what I'm going to actually do is bring down the exposure just like we did before. But in this case, we're going to turn on the auto mask, because we want to be careful that when we paint over the sky, we don't also paint on the rooftops and darken that as well. Now the good thing of Lightroom is that it's non-destructive, so whatever we do to these photos, it won't ruin the original photo, and we can always go back and erase and you know, that mask that we did that we're, you know, darkening the sky. So here again, I'm going to actually bring a smaller size on the brush, and I'm just going to paint over it and bring it down a little bit. Now it may not look like much, but it's actually darkening the sky, so it doesn't look as, you know, with that weird, you know, texture to it. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. And always a good way to see, you know, what you're doing is you come here to the mask tool, you can click here and you can see what you've actually done, or you can just use the exposure and go left and right and see. Now you can see here that looks like I paint a little bit over the sky, so over the rooftop, so we're going to fix that. And the way that we do that is actually we select here the mask, and you'll see here where it's painted, we're going to hit the erase button, and it's going to change the our brush tool to the minus sign, which means wherever we paint over, it's going to erase. So I'm going to make the brush a little smaller, and I'm just going to paint here on the side of the roof top, and you can see how the red, which is the mask that we created, disappears. And we're going to fix all this right here on the edges. The mask tool is great, but sometimes it'll do this, and it'll happen when sometimes the colors are really too close, because it won't know, because again, it uses the colors to differentiate what's what the mask is doing on. But no problem, we'll just go here and fix it. It's not a big deal. And again, the erase tool, you can turn on the auto mask, which does the same thing for the erasing. And there we go. So we got that fixed. Let's go ahead and turn off the mask, and there our sky looks great. We can even bring it darker if we want. We can put it pitch black and it still looks good. So there you go. Those are the couple of quick fixes that I do when editing the photos here in Lightroom. Hey guys, so those are the photos, the quick tips here that I'll show you on Lightroom. Hopefully you like these videos. Now again, if this is the first time watching these videos, my name is Disney Nuts, and I do photography around the theme parks here in Central Florida. And this is a spin-off of our other channel, which is called The Journey Duel, which we do food reviews and other fun stuff. I decided to create this channel to be able to share and be able to show you guys how some of the stuff that I do when it comes to Disney photography and fixing and stuff like that, because I found that there's not much channels related to Disney photography that show stuff. So that's what this channel was created for, you guys to share the knowledge and hopefully get your Disney photography up and going. So with that said, if you like what you saw and you want to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button to keep this channel flowing. And if you like, go ahead and share any comments below. I'd really appreciate it to see what you guys have used, these tricks or tips on your photos. Until then, stay awesome. See ya. Bye.